I had always been fascinated by old countryside houses. The idea of wide-open spaces, rustic charm, and a quiet escape from the city seemed like a dream. That's exactly what led me, my wife Claire, and our 2 children, Emma and Noah, to purchase a house that seemed too good to be true. It was large, old, and full of character, exactly the kind of place we had been looking for. The previous owners sold it for a fraction of what it was worth. We should have asked why. The first few weeks were uneventful. We spent our time unpacking, exploring the property, and imagining the memories we'd make. One day, while organizing the basement, I noticed something strange about one of the walls. Unlike the solid stonework of the rest of the basement, this section seemed different, too thin and oddly hollow. Curiosity got the better of me. I tapped along the wall, confirming my suspicion it wasn't solid. After some effort with a hammer and chisel, I broke through the plaster and revealed a door behind it. The wood was old and scarred with deep scratches, as if someone or something had clawed at it desperately. The handle was rusty, and no matter how hard I pulled, the door wouldn't budge. When I told Claire about it, she shivered. "Maybe it's just an old storage room," she suggested, clearly unsettled. "We don't need to open it." But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. We left it alone for a while. A few nights later, strange things began happening. At first it was subtle. We heard scraping sounds at night, faint but unmistakable. They seemed to come from the basement, just beyond the false wall. Thinking it was rodents, I set traps but found nothing. Then came the whispers. Low, almost inaudible voices floated up from the basement. Claire thought it was just the wind, but I wasn't so sure. Things escalated. One morning, Emma asked, "Who moved the chair in my room? We hadn't touched it." Claire and I shrugged it off as her imagination, but when I found the living room furniture shifted a few inches from where we left it, my unease grew. The doors throughout the house began creaking open by themselves. At first I thought it was a draft, but they always opened toward the basement. Noah, only 8, began waking up in tears. He claimed he saw a dark figure standing at the top of the basement stairs. "It watches me, Dad," he whispered one night, his eyes wide with fear. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Determined to find out what we were dealing with, I went to the local records office. I learned that the house had a troubling history. The most recent owner, a man named Gerald Hawthorne, had lived there alone for decades. He was a recluse, known for his eccentricity and obsession with dark rituals. When I shared this with Claire, her face went pale. "We need to leave," she said, her voice trembling. But I wasn't ready to give up on our dream home. I was convinced that if I could just open that door, I'd find an explanation. One stormy night, I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing my tools, I went to the basement. Claire begged me to stop, but I was too far gone. The door resisted at first, but after several forceful strikes, the lock gave way. The door creaked open, revealing the hidden room. I wish I had left it sealed. The smell hit me first, an overwhelming stench of decay. My flashlight illuminated a horrifying sight. In the center of the room was a crude, makeshift shrine. Candles, long burned out, surrounded a small pile of bones, human bones. The remains were small, too small. A child. The walls were covered in strange, jagged symbols carved deep into the wood. They seemed to pulse with a dark energy. In the corner lay a tattered journal, its pages filled with scrawled ramblings. Gerald Hawthorne had tried to trap something within these walls, something malevolent, tied to the remains. His last entry read, "It cannot be contained. It hungers. God forgive me." As I backed away, the air grew colder, and a deep, guttural sound filled the room. The shadows seemed to move, coalescing into a shape. It was neither human nor animal. A twisted, inhuman figure with hollow eyes and a mouth that stretched into a grotesque grin. The lights in the house flickered violently. Claire and the kids screamed upstairs. I ran, slamming the door behind me, but it didn't stop. The whole house seemed to vibrate with its fury. The whispers became deafening, a cacophony of voices crying out in agony. We fled into the night, leaving everything behind. The police found nothing. When they examined the basement, there was no hidden room, just a solid, unbroken wall. They looked at me like I was insane. We stayed in a motel that night, too terrified to return. The next day, I spoke with an old local who knew the house's story. He warned me in a low, serious tone. "You never disturb the walls. Some things are meant to stay buried." We moved far away, desperate for a fresh start. For a while, the nightmares faded, but one night as I tucked Noah into bed, he whispered something that sent chills down my spine. "Dad," he said, "the boy from the basement followed us. He's watching me." I turned to the corner of the room. There was nothing there, at least, nothing I could see. Some doors are never truly closed. Moving into a new home is supposed to be a joyful milestone, a fresh start. That's exactly what my wife Sarah and I felt when we first moved into our suburban house. It was quiet, picturesque, and filled with the promise of peaceful evenings and weekend barbecues. The neighborhood was everything we had dreamed of. A cul-de-sac lined with neatly trimmed lawns, friendly neighbors, and a place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But things didn't stay perfect for long. We had been living there for only a few days when we found the first gift. It was just a single rose, placed carefully on the front porch. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. Sarah smiled, thinking it was a sweet welcome from one of the neighbors, but when we asked around, no one admitted to leaving it. The next morning there was another gift, a handwritten card that simply said, "Welcome to the neighborhood." The handwriting was neat, almost too precise, and there was no signature. We shrugged it off as a kind, if mysterious gesture, but things started to get strange when the gifts became more personal. One afternoon, Sarah couldn't find her favorite necklace. She swore she left it on her dresser, but it had vanished. A day later, the necklace reappeared, carefully laid on the front porch, right where the rose had been. Then it got worse. I began noticing small changes in the house. Things that didn't feel right. One evening, I came home to find the front door slightly ajar. Sarah insisted she had locked it before leaving for work. We checked the entire house, but nothing seemed missing. Then there was the furniture. A chair in the living room was slightly moved from its original spot. Drawers were left half open. Sarah started feeling uneasy, and I could see the fear growing in her eyes. It was subtle at first, but it was there. An instinct that someone had been inside. We decided to install security cameras. I figured it was better to be safe than sorry. For the first few nights, the cameras showed nothing unusual. I started to think we were being paranoid, but then, one night, I saw it. It was around 3 a.m. The footage from the backyard camera showed a figure standing just beyond the edge of our patio, motionless. It was a man, tall and thin, his face obscured by the shadows. He didn't move for nearly 2 hours. He just stood there, staring up at our bedroom window. When I showed Sarah, she covered her mouth in horror. We called the police, but they found no signs of forced entry. All they could do was advise us to stay vigilant. That same night, we saw him again. This time he was closer, standing at the base of the stairs leading to our back door. The next morning, I noticed something. Our neighbor across the street, Mr. Grayson, was watching us. He was an older man, quiet and reclusive. His house had darkened windows and overgrown hedges that gave it a sinister air. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching us far too closely. When I confronted him, he denied everything. His face remained expressionless as I described the man in the footage. He smiled, a slow, unsettling grin, and said, "Must be someone else. I've been here the whole time." But the look in his eyes told a different story. That night, another gift appeared on our porch, my missing watch. I hadn't even realized it was gone. We had to know the truth. I started searching every corner of the house, and that's when I found it, a trapdoor hidden beneath an old rug in the basement. It led to a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough to crawl through. The tunnel stretched under our house and directly into Grayson's basement. When I reached the other side, I nearly gagged from the smell. The crawl space was filled with objects. Our objects. Photos of Sarah and me, trinkets we thought we'd lost, even a shirt that had vanished from our laundry. In the far corner there was a mannequin. It was dressed in one of Sarah's outfits, a wig styled to resemble her hair, and a grotesque mask painted with a crude smile. There was also a journal. Page after page detailed Grayson's obsession. He wrote about watching Sarah from his windows, about entering our home when we were away, about standing over us while we slept. I barely made it out of the tunnel before Grayson appeared. He was waiting for me, blocking the exit. His face was twisted with a look of pure, unhinged delight. "You were never supposed to find this," he whispered. "We were happy, weren't we?" I tried to push past him, but he grabbed me with surprising strength. "You don't understand," he hissed. "She belongs here, with me." The struggle felt like it lasted forever. I finally broke free and scrambled back into the house, slamming the trap door behind me. We called the police again. This time, they had all the evidence they needed. Grayson was arrested, but the damage was done. The safety we had once felt in our home was gone forever. We moved within a week, leaving everything behind. But the nightmare wasn't over. Months later, after we had settled into a new home far from that cursed neighborhood, Sarah received a package. There was no return address. Inside was a single item, her old necklace. And note, "I always know where you are." Michael had always dreamed of a fresh start. After a painful breakup and years of dead-end jobs, he was ready for a new beginning. The opportunity came when he found an affordable house in a quiet, picturesque town, one that seemed like it had just fallen out of a postcard. Nestled on the outskirts, it was a charming cottage with freshly renovated interiors, an inviting porch, and plenty of space for him to start anew. The asking price was shockingly low, too good to pass up. He could already picture his life there, peace, solitude, a chance to rebuild. However, the locals didn't share Michael's enthusiasm. "That house," one of them had said when he first visited the local diner, "you might want to think twice about it. It's got a history." Michael had brushed it off as superstition, just small-town gossip. But there was something about the way they said it that nagged at him, an unease in their eyes, as if they knew something he didn't. They didn't elaborate, and Michael figured they were just wary of change. He was convinced the house was perfect for him. He couldn't resist. The first few days in the house were blissfully uneventful. The walls had been freshly painted, the floors gleamed, and the kitchen was sleek and modern. It was everything he had hoped for, until the whispers started. At first it was subtle. Michael thought he might be imagining it. Strange cold spots would appear in certain rooms, especially late in the evening. It made no sense. There was no draft, no open windows, yet the temperature would drop like walking into an invisible chill. Then there were the sounds. Quiet at first, like a murmur from far away. He dismissed it as the house settling, the old beams creaking in the night. But as the days passed, the whispers grew clearer, closer. Sometimes he could hear them under the floorboards, faint, unintelligible, like a conversation held in a language he couldn't understand. One night, he woke up to a sensation of pure dread. It wasn't a nightmare, just a feeling, a sinking sensation in his gut. The room was dark and everything seemed still, but his heart raced. He thought he heard something moving in the walls. His eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of danger, but it happened again next night. And the next. And then there was the dream. A shadowy figure, tall and lanky with hollow black eyes, stood at the foot of his bed. It didn't move, didn't speak, but Michael felt its presence pressing down on him, suffocating him. He woke up drenched in sweat, convinced that something was wrong. But how could he explain it? He'd only been living there for a week. The strange occurrences escalated quickly. He began to feel like he wasn't alone in the house. Doors would creak open on their own, objects moved just out of sight. Nothing big, nothing overtly threatening, but enough to send a shiver up his spine. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Michael found an old dusty box buried under a pile of forgotten furniture. Inside there was a journal. It was weathered, the pages fragile, but something about it drew him in. He began reading it. That it was it seemed, he wrote. The journal, written by someone named Jonathan Wheeler, detailed the history of the land, how it had once been the site of a failed spiritualist commune, one that dabbled in dark rituals in an attempt to commune with forces beyond human comprehension. The commune had come to an end in a violent, tragic way, and the final entry in the journal spoke of a ritual performed to bind something malevolent beneath the foundation of the house, trapping it there for eternity. At first, Michael was skeptical, but the more he read, the more the events around him seemed to line up. The land had a cursed history, and it seemed the commune's dark rituals had left an indelible mark on the place. The more Michael read about the commune and its failed attempts to contain whatever dark force had been summoned, the more obsessed he became. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something beneath the house, something ancient and angry. The whispers had turned into something more, clear, distinct voices that seemed to call his name in the dead of night. Sometimes he could swear he saw figures out of the corner of his eye, moving in the shadows, but when he looked directly at them, they were gone. The house had a way of shifting, bending light, making it difficult to trust his own senses. But what disturbed him most were the nightmares. Visions of grotesque figures, their faces twisted in agony, reaching out for him. One night, after hearing the whispers again, he decided to investigate further. He thought that if he could just get to the bottom of the mystery, maybe the haunting would stop. The journal mentioned a relic, an idol, that was supposedly the key to the commune's failed ritual. Michael had to find it. The whispers seemed to be guiding him, pulling him toward the basement, toward the place where the foundation had been altered. He knew he shouldn't, but he couldn't stop himself. Armed with nothing but a shovel and a growing sense of dread, Michael decided to excavate beneath the house. It was late at night, and the town was silent, as it usually was. The foundation seemed to hum beneath him as he dug, like it was alive, watching him. The soil was dense, thick with moisture, as if it had been undisturbed for years. After what felt like hours of digging, Michael's shovel struck something hard, a stone surface. His heart raced as he cleared away the dirt to reveal a small, grotesque idol. It was a hideous thing, carved from dark stone, its features twisted into an expression of rage and agony. Its eyes were wide, bulging, and it seemed to gaze directly at Michael. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him as he reached down to touch it. As his fingers brushed against the idol, a cold, searing pain shot through his hand. The ground beneath him trembled, and the whispers intensified into a screeching, incomprehensible chorus. It was as if the house itself was alive, angry that its secret had been disturbed. There was a journal entry buried with the idol, its pages brittle with age. The final entry was chilling. The ritual failed. The entity is free. We have sealed it within the foundation. It will return one day, and when it does, it will take what is owed. Suddenly, the house groaned, the walls shaking, and a deafening roar filled the air. Michael staggered back, the idol still clutched in his hand. The shadows seemed to move around him, stretching and twisting like living things. It was too late. As soon as Michael disturbed the relic, the foundation seemed to come alive. The house rumbled as if it were breathing. The floorboards splintered and shadowy figures began to crawl out from beneath them. Their eyes were hollow, their faces gaunt and twisted, mouths stretched into snarls of rage. They surrounded him, their whispers now deafening, filled with ancient anger. The house began to buckle, its walls twisting and shifting like they were made of flesh, not wood. Michael couldn't breathe. An overwhelming sense of suffocation filled his lungs, as if the very air had turned toxic. The entity was free, and it was hungry. Michael's first instinct was to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The house itself was alive, a dark labyrinth with no escape. He tried to destroy the idol, but it was impervious to any harm he could do. It was as if the thing was protected by the very darkness that had been unleashed. Desperate, Michael remembered the ritual described in the journal. There had to be a way to reverse it, to bind the entity once more, but the ritual required something more than just knowledge. It required a sacrifice. The shadows closed in on him and the house began to collapse, as if the evil force was trying to devour everything in its path. Michael could feel the darkness clawing at his mind, pulling him deeper into madness. He knew what he had to do, but he didn't want to accept it. In the end, there was no choice. Michael had to complete the binding ritual, and the only way to do it was by using his own blood. The journal had described it. He had to offer himself, part of his soul, to trap the entity once again. With shaking hands, he drew a circle on the floor and recited the incantation from the journal. The darkness around him screamed in rage as the ground trembled beneath him. The shadows tried to stop him, but Michael's will was stronger. As he completed the final words of the ritual, the house groaned one last time, the foundation cracking open. The shadows screeched as they were sucked back into the idol, which shattered into dust. Michael collapsed, exhausted, his blood staining the floor. The house fell silent. The air was still, the darkness receded. Michael thought he had won, but as he left, he knew something remained. Something deep within the house, something still waiting. The house was empty, but it was far from free. Michael couldn't stay. He sold the house, leaving it behind. Years later, a young family moved in, unaware of the horrors that lay beneath. The cycle had begun again. And deep beneath the house, the foundation still hummed.